Hi everyone, and welcome to Game 6 of Match 1. The score is 4-4, so 3-away, 3-away. And this particular game, it's quite an exciting game with some real reversals of fortune. Features a theme about when to leave the defensive anchor and the inadvisability of leaving it early in the middle game. And then that situation that you often come across, right, with an anchor on the defensive bar point, and an opponent has some checkers on the midpoint, and that 6-point face-off, right, and when to abandon that anchor. I think it's quite interesting, and of course the fear factor enters into this, right? We're afraid of leaving a shot, especially when your opponent has sixes to roll. But really, it's something that you have to take into careful consideration, right? And I hope this game hopes to illustrate some principles behind that. So enjoy, and as usual, feel free to leave some comments and suggestions after you've watched. Thanks. Okay, so let's get started. And white and black are both 3 away. It's 4-4 to 7. Okay, and white wins the opening roll and splits. Black correctly hits with the 1, though as a general rule of thumb, when you strip the 8-point to hit, okay, it's much more common, okay, so to bring a checker down from the midpoint, kind of to bolster the defense now that the 8-point is stripped, to bolster the offense. As you can see from the evaluation, it's quite close, but as a general rule of thumb, right, if you strip the 8-point to hit, then you generally bring a checker down from the midpoint. Okay. And white makes the anchor here instead of engaging in a hit fest. And the main reason for this is that, you have this longer term asset of the defensive anchor, but also black is quite front loaded with his checkers here, especially with the stacked 6-point. And so if you engage in a hit fest, then that gives black a chance to use these checkers to hit and make themselves useful. Whereas when you have the anchor, then these checkers, they're a bit neutralized, aren't they? They'll have to just land behind the anchor, which is not so effective. And so making the anchor here is the clear choice, even though you leave a blot for black to hit. But of course, it's early and black's home board is not a threat. Unfortunately for black, he doesn't understand the importance of the defensive anchor in this case. And it's clear that you have to make that 20-point here. Protecting the blot, even though it does make kind of a mini prime, a 3 prime, is not so important. Making the anchor is crucial here, especially since black has that extra builder. White has that extra builder. So either, making the 20-point and making the 11 to block, or making the 20-point and starting to build the home board, either case is fine, but not making the 20-point is quite a big blunder. Unfortunately for white, he's not able to point on black's head. And so he just slots the 4-point and reinforces the 8-point. This is kind of interesting. It seems perfectly fine to make the opponent's bar point with and a defensive anchor there. But XG says, listen, the 20-point is probably better. Just because the race is not exactly in black's favor. Okay, and so the 20-point, when you're behind in the race, you want a defensive anchor that's a little further back. And even though it's not a huge difference, it is something to keep in mind, okay, if you have a choice. White makes the 3-point, which seems natural, to start building the home board. Even though XG says maybe slotting the 5-point makes more sense, but I didn't really want to strip my midpoint, but perhaps it's not a big issue. Okay, nothing much there. White makes the 5-point. Obviously, that running from the defensive anchor. In some cases, especially when you're far ahead in the race, this makes sense. But in this position, it's just crazy because White is ahead in the race, so you don't want to run. Yeah. So slotting the 4-point is fine. Yeah. So here's the first instance of running from the defensive anchor, and it is a key learning point that I've gotten from analyzing my matches with XG, is that XG says don't run from the defensive anchor unless you absolutely have to, or if indeed the racing lead is huge. Okay, in this case the racing lead is not that big. And even though White has a stronger home board and Black doesn't have much of a home board, even then, it's not a good idea. And even I looked at the alternative, right? And it looked kind of awkward. And I thought, no, that can't be right. But it is. Don't leave the defensive anchor. And in this case, in particular, we come back to that point, right? That Black is quite front-loaded. He's stripped on these points. And so Black really wants to do something useful with these checkers. And if White stays on the defensive anchor, Black's going to have to start dumping them behind the anchor. Okay, unless he gets doubles or something. But let's give him the opportunity to do that instead of, but running from the anchor means that Black can now potentially use these checkers usefully to make the 5-point, make the 4-point, and attack. So that's why it's such a big mistake. But generally speaking, I noticed again and again that XG will ding you as with a mistake, or in some cases a blunder, if you leave your defensive anchor prematurely. Okay, so really hesitate to do that unless you feel that it's absolutely necessary, or if you do have that really big racing lead, then it could be justified then. And lo and behold, Black hits and makes a home board point. White enters, and there should really not be much hesitation here, right? Make the 4-point board, even though you leave a blot. Okay, it's much more important to have this strong home board as a threat for Black. And notice if Black does hit the blot, there's likely to be return shots, and with such a strong home board, Black's going to be really hesitant. Okay. Okay, so let's clear it up. Nothing much constructive for Black to do here, unfortunately for him, and White remakes the 8-point, which is a nice little touch. This is kind of an interesting decision. Making the 1-point is not bad, because one of the themes of this position is to attack the lone White checker, and having an extra home board point for that is good. But XG does like the idea, XG says you're going to have to break the midpoint at some point. Okay, so maybe this is a good time to do it. You have a chance to maybe make the 5-point. Okay, and also I think it has to do with the race, as we'll see later. By playing these 2 checkers to the 1-point, you are bearing some checkers, right? So that doesn't help with the race so much. And this is a better racing kind of move. So I think that's a factor as well, but it's close. Okay, White can only consolidate with this roll, and Black has to break the midpoint in any case. White seizes his chance to make a run for it, and black misses. And kind of misses in a big way. This certainly changes the complexion of the race. Black is now quite far ahead, but notice all the buried checkers. And all these buried checkers mean that it's much more difficult for black to set up a decent home board, and his defensive anchor is starting to look more and more stranded. Yeah. White slots the 2-point. So at this point, black has to think about saving sixes, right? But you have to be careful about saving too many sixes at the expense of your home board. It is interesting here that XG does suggest 6-3, saving 2 sixes, but I guess part of the rationale is that, you know, black is kind of building, slotting the 3 points so that black can make that. Perhaps XG feels that it's kind of hopeless to think that you're going to be able to save your home board from disintegrating, so you might as well, you know, aim for a 4-point board, the 4, 3, 2, 1 points. Maybe that has to do with it. But black's move is equally fine, yeah, saving 1 6 at least. Okay, white strengthens his home board. And yeah, black, you know, basically sees that there's no point in saving a 6. White still has the timing advantage here. So even if you try to save a 6 here, I mean, it's not too bad a move just to make the 3-point. But even if you save a 6 here, you're likely to waste it next roll. So black instead aims for the 5-point board, the best board. White rolls a little higher than he'd like, okay? And black's 5-point board didn't last very long. And we're still kind of in this Mexican standoff here. Now, this is a little interesting. There's not a big difference between the two moves, 6-1-2-1 and 6-5-6-1. This move obviously saves a 5, which could be useful, but it's not so important now that black has a weaker home board. Okay. And for the race, this is perhaps a little better, not burying an extra checker. Yeah, but it's close. Black rolls a 5-3, and this is the time to run. Okay, so let's bring up our little theme here, fear factor, right? Okay, so black is afraid to leave the defensive anchor, and instead dismantles his home board even more and buries even more checkers. Okay, but now really was the time to run, and it's a blunder not to run here. Especially, you know, white does have an open point in his home board. It's true, he has a strong 5-point home board, but there is an open point. So even if you get hit, it's not necessarily a disaster. But, you know, what are the chances of being hit? It looks like, you know, like these kinds of 6s, right, are likely, but the odds actually say that, let's count, 11 shots for any 6, 4-2, and 5-1. That's another 4 shots, so that's 15 shots. And then 3-3 and 2-2 also hit. Okay, so that's 17 shots out of 36. So actually, white is the underdog to hit. 17 shots are a lot, but 19 shots miss. Okay, so it's actually, you know, it's worth the risk. Of course, you don't just wantonly run from your defensive anchor, but, you know, instead of burying more checkers and dismantling your home board, now is the time to run. Okay. Because even if you stay and you get a shot at white, then your home board is not much of a threat. Yeah. And the key thing here is the race, pretty much. All these buried checkers mean that, you know, black has to bring these checkers all the way around before he can start bearing off, okay? Which is a long way to go. So better start running now. Yeah. So again, that's kind of the lesson to learn about fear here. We get these 6 shots quite a bit in games, and if you have enough experience, you know that we miss a lot. Of course, we hit some, but how many times have I missed this 6 shot? And you know, it's frustrating, but from the odds point of view, you've got to say, you know, actually, I'm the underdog, not by much, but you know, it's kind of to be expected. Don't assume you're going to hit, and don't assume you're going to be hit. Okay. So, interestingly enough, this is actually a double for white, and the pip count, the race is deceptive, right? Because of all these buried checkers. I was deceived, and my opponent was deceived, as you'll see. And this affected the cube decisions. But this is a double for white, basically partly because of the race and black's buried checkers, but also black's weak home board, okay? So even if black is able to hit white, white has a good chance to enter and still come around, okay? And with so many buried checkers, black has a lot of work to do to get those 2 checkers around. I was surprised by how big a mistake this is, not to double this. But looking at the position and the wastage of black, yeah, I can understand it better. And because white didn't save a 5 last turn, then yeah, he's got to run, which is fine, because I imagine running is, even if white could play a 5 from the 6 point, it's probably best to run because of black's weak home board in this position. Okay, and lo and behold, black misses, and he misses with a number that forces him to bury another checker. White does see now that it's a double, a big double, but black was fooled by the pip count, no doubt, and thought this was still a take. But yeah, it's basically a very deceptive pip count. White is the favorite to jump over that anchor, and then black has to move these 2 checkers all the way around before he can bear off. So white, you know, has quite a large advantage. Black should pass. Okay, especially at this score, right? It's 3 away, and so taking a cube and losing means your opponent goes to Crawford, which you don't like. Passing the cube means your opponent goes to 2 away and you're 3 away, which is not a huge difference compared to Crawford, right? So there is a tendency to let go of cubes a little more easily at the 3 away score. Yeah, keep that in mind as well. So it turns out that white was not able to jump over, and black hits. Okay, and this is one of the advantages of being able to access the analysis after you play the match on Backgammon Galaxy, because, you know, black might think, oh yeah, I made the right decision, I took a cube, I hit, I'm going to turn the game around now, maybe recube. But being able to see the analysis shows how big a mistake it was to take. It's not a problem to make a mistake, it's a problem to keep making the same mistake. Okay, so that kind of instant analysis does help us to learn when the memory is still fresh. It's a great advantage nowadays. White enters, but he's got to jump out immediately, and black hits again. So now things are starting to look a little dicey for white. Black has managed to bring his checkers over to the next quadrant, and unless he hits and enters, you know, enters and hits, I should say, he could be in serious trouble. But justice is served in a way. It doesn't always happen that we have justice in backgammon, right? But white is able to bring the checker home, but it's still Still close kind of game. White has the advantage, but it's not hopeless for black. And so let's see how the Baron goes. But you do see that, white is ready to, has a nice balanced position, is ready to take checkers off, whereas black still has some work to do. Yeah. So let's see how the bear off goes. 2 checkers off, 1 checker off, nice double, 3 checkers off. Ouch, 1 checker off again. This is definitely a result of the buried checkers of the wastage. 2 checkers off. Okay, black is going to take 2 checkers off pretty much every roll. 2 checkers off, 2 checkers off. And a great roll from white pretty much guarantees the victory here. And bang, it's over. Okay, so, well, there you can see that the wasted checkers did make a difference somewhat to this race, yeah? Okay, and black's performance rating really took a hit because of a couple big blunders, okay? But, and now we're at Crawford, okay? So the lesson again from this game has to do with defensive anchors, when to leave the defensive anchor, right? Hesitate when it's early, but when you do have that kind of standoff between the midpoint and the opponent's bar point, then you have to weigh the risks and keep in mind the race as well as the strength of your home board. At some point, you're going to have to run from that anchor, so try to find the right time. Yeah. So I hope that was a useful lesson, and look forward to seeing you in the next game, and to see whether white can pull off the victory in the Crawford or whether black can stave off defeat. Hope to see you then. Thanks.